fiery horse with the speed of light, a cloud of dust, and a hearty hi-yo silver. The Lone Ranger. His faithful Indian companion Tonto, the daring and resourceful masked rider of the plains, led the fight for law and order in the early western United States. Nowhere in the pages of history can one find a greater champion of justice. Return with us now to those thrilling days of yesteryear. From out of the past come the thundering hoofbeats of the great horse Silver. The Lone Ranger rides again.
Come on, Silver. Let's go, big fella. Hi-yo, Silver! Hi!
Sheriff John Trent sat at the desk in his office, which occupied part of the jail building in the town of Orville. The veteran lawman had long been proud of his shooting ability, but now he winced as he read the newspaper. For the first time in his life, he was under editorial fire. As a deputy entered the office, Sheriff Trent looked up and said,
"What's the news from the courthouse, Jake?"
Judge Carter is to decide today whether we have enough evidence to hold Hap Miller and Lance Holt for stage robbery and murder.
Those owl hoots deserve to hang.
You should have shot them like you did their partner, Hook Mason.
According to this newspaper story, I murdered Hook Mason.
You shot that crook in self-defense.
The editor of the Orville News says I murdered Hook. He says Hook and his partners were innocent prospectors.
That's politics, Sheriff. The editor belongs to the other party, and you'll soon be up for re-election.
Yeah, I'm sure we got the right men, Jake. We found their tracks at the stagecoach where they killed the guard and driver and made off with the Wells Fargo money.
We got the right man, no doubt of it.
We followed those tracks a long way across the Badlands before we caught up to the crooks. It is for me murdering Hook Mason.
He fired first, Sheriff. You had to shoot him. Don't feel bad about that.
Paper says I'm trying to frame those others.
Yeah, the trouble is our story's not good evidence in court. Now, if the stage guard and driver were alive to identify him, or if we'd found the stolen money...
Yeah, the crooks must have hidden the loot before we caught up to them.
Either hid it or threw it away.
Now 2 murderers will probably go free, while the newspaper calls me a murderer. The editors even brought Hook Mason's widow into the story.
Hmm? How's that?
He says she's penniless, wants to sell Hook's gun, gun belt, saddle, and the other things I turned over to her. She hopes to raise the cash to pay her way back east.
That gun of Hook's is a mighty fine Colt.
I've been thinking of buying Hook's things.
Yeah. And because you feel sorry for the widow, you'll probably pay 3 times what they're worth.
Maybe. Jake, hold down the office for a little while, will you?
Yeah, sure thing.
I'm going to call on Mrs. Mason.
Meanwhile, in a nearby camp, the Lone Ranger read the newspaper that Tonto had brought with supplies from town. The masked man scanned the news, then said,
Tonto, Sheriff John Trent's in trouble.
That plenty bad. Me hear him good lawman.
Yes, one of the best.
Why him in trouble?
This paper says he unnecessarily shot and killed one of 3 men suspected of stage robbery and murder. 2 of the men are now in jail.
Who sheriff killed?
Hook Mason. His name is familiar.
Me remember. I hear it somewhere.
Now I remember. We saw the name on a reward poster in Missouri. Hook Mason is one of the names used by an outlaw who escaped from the Missouri prison while serving a life sentence.
That right? Him have crooked trigger finger.
Yes. Because of that crooked finger, he had to cut off the front part of the trigger guard on any gun he used.
Maybe him same fellow sheriff shoot.
If we could prove that, the newspaper editor could no longer claim that John Trent shot an innocent prospector.
That help, sheriff.
Yes. This paper speaks of Hook Mason's widow, who's trying to sell her husband's possessions. Find out where she lives, Tonto, and tonight we'll call on her.
Me go find out now. Easy, Scout, easy, fella. Get him up, Scout.
That evening, when the sheriff returned to his office with a fancy gun belt buckled around his hips and a new-style Colt in the holster, the deputy said,
Well, Sheriff, I see you got Hook's gun and belt.
That's right, Jake. Also bought his horse and saddle and the rest of his gear, which I left at my house.
Did you find Mrs. Mason unfriendly?
No. It seemed to me she hadn't been happy with Hook. I think she's glad to be free, to go back to the east.
She's not the only one who's free.
What do you mean?
A little while ago, I released Hap Miller and Lance Holt.
What?
The judge ordered their release for lack of evidence, so I had to give them their guns and horses and let them go.
You know where they went?
No.
They should have been followed.
Oh, it wouldn't do any good to follow them, Sheriff. If they know where the Wells Fargo money is, they'll be careful not to lead anyone to it.
You're probably right. Jake, those crooks have gotten away with murder.
Meanwhile, Hap Miller and Lance Holt had ridden out of Orville and were heading their horses toward a light that showed in an isolated cabin.
Hey, Lance, the shack is lighted. Mary Mason must be home.
Let's hope we find Hook's gun belt there. We gotta have that cartridge.
You sure Hook put the map inside the cartridge?
I saw him do it.
I kept watching for the lawmen who were trailing us. I didn't notice what Hook was doing.
Hook noted landmarks on a piece of paper. I saw him dump the powder out of a cartridge and put the paper in its place.
Did he put the cartridge in his gun belt?
Yeah.
We'd never find the cash without that paper.
That's right.
We know it's buried somewhere west of Slim Butte, but that's not enough.
We're close to the cabin. Rein in.
Oh, there.
Oh. Easy there.
We'd better cover our faces with bandanas. Mary Mason knows us by sight.
What of it?
We've got no cash to buy Hook's gun belt. We'll have to take it.
That's right.
Hook Mason's widow was busy packing a few belongings for her return to the east. As she closed a carpet bag, Hap Miller and Lance Holt, their faces covered by bandanas, entered the cabin with guns in their hands.
All right, keep quiet or you get hurt.
Oh, what do you want?
Hook's gun belt.
It's not here.
Don't lie.
I'm not lying. Why do you want the belt?
None of your business.
Where is it?
I sold all of Hook's things to the sheriff. He knew I needed money to return to the east, and he bought everything to help me out.
Maybe she's telling the truth. I don't see any of Hook's gear around here.
I am telling the truth.
We'll find out. You're going with us.
Where?
To the sheriff's office. We want Trent to open the back door of his office. He'll do it for you. Now, come on.
No, let me go.
Hey, stop struggling.
Follow me.
There goes the table.
Give me a hand.
All right, come on.
Oh, my arm.
You might as well go peaceful.
All right, I'll go.
few minutes after Mary left with the two men, the Lone Ranger and Tonto rode up to the cabin and drew rein.
Easy, steady, big fella.
Seeing the door wide open, they went inside.
Look like no one here.
There's been a struggle here, Tonto. Notice a table and a scuffed rug.
That's right. We look for Hook Mason's gun?
No, come with me.
Where we go?
To the sheriff's office. We'll tell John Trent about the man who escaped from the Missouri prison, and we'll report the condition of Mary Mason's cabin. Easy, steady, big fella. Come on, sit there.
Come on, Scout.
While the Lone Ranger and Tonto were riding toward town, Sheriff Trent sat at his desk alone in the office. He had fired his newly purchased gun a few times and had just finished cleaning and reloading it when someone rapped on the locked back door.
Wonder who that is.
The sheriff dropped the gun into his holster as he moved to the door and called,
Hey, who's there?
Sheriff, it's Mary Mason.
Oh, I'll unlock the door.
Outside the door, the outlaws, whose faces were still covered, stood behind Mary Mason with guns drawn.
Why'd you come to... Gunman, what's this mean?
Place your hand.
Owl hooch.
Sheriff, they made me come here.
Go on in.
The sheriff held his hands at shoulder level as the two men, using Mary Mason as a partial shield, entered the office. Then suddenly the woman leaped aside. The sheriff drew and triggered his gun.
Sidewinders.
But the gun misfired.
Give me that.
And Hap Miller knocked the gun from the lawman's hand.
Try to shoot us, huh?
Hold him, I'll rap him with my gun barrel.
Yeah, that got him.
Hey, grab the woman. She's trying to get away.
Not so fast.
Let me go.
Don't let her yell.
I've got my hand over her mouth.
All right, here's the sheriff's bandana. I'll gag her with it.
Go ahead. I'll hold her throat. If she tries to yell, I'll throttle her.
When Mary Mason was gagged and tightly bound to a chair, the outlaws turned their attention to the unconscious lawman on the floor.
Hey, he's wearing Hook's gun belt.
I'll unbuckle it.
Are you sure one of these cartridges has the map inside?
Yeah, but I don't know which one. There, I got the belt. That's Vamoose.
Soon after Hap and Lance rode away with the gun belt, the Lone Ranger and Tonto drew rein in the darkness behind the sheriff's office.
Easy, steady, big fella.
Through the open door, they saw a woman tied to a chair, gagged, and a man lying on the floor. They hurried into the room.
Release the woman, Tonto. I'll see about this man.
Him where bad?
He must be the sheriff, John Trent.
Oh.
He's alive. I think he's regaining consciousness.
No, you're not gagged.
Oh, my throat.
No, you not try talk. After me cut ropes, me get you water.
What hit me?
Steady, Sheriff.
Mask. I gotta get up.
I'll help you to a chair. Take it easy.
I don't savvy. Two masked men try to kill me, and then when I come to, I find a masked man helping me.
Here's your chair. Sit down for a minute.
Who are you? Why you mask?
We'll get to your questions later, Sheriff. Please believe that Tonto and I are on your side.
Shadow?
That's the name of my Indian friend.
Oh. Well, I'll admit you proved friendly so far.
We read what the newspapers said about the shooting of Hook Mason. The name was familiar to us. We had heard of a murderer by that name who escaped.
The curtain falls on the first act of our Lone Ranger adventure. Before the next exciting scenes, please permit us to pause for just a few moments. Now to continue. Hoping to win the sheriff's confidence, the Lone Ranger told about the convict who had escaped from prison in Missouri, and of the trip to the Mason home to learn whether the man shot by the sheriff was the same individual. Then Mary said,
I'm Mary Mason. I knew nothing of my husband's activities. He rarely came home, and when he did, he stayed for only a few days.
Did he have a crooked index finger?
Yes. He must have been the man who broke out of prison.
No wonder he shot it out with me when I tried to arrest him. He probably figured he'd be identified and sent back to prison.
What happened here in your office, Sheriff?
Well, I heard a rap on the back door.
Let me explain, Sheriff.
Yes, ma'am.
2 men whose faces were covered by bandanas came to my home and demanded my husband's gun belt. When I told them I'd sold it to you, Sheriff, they brought me here.
Some direction. Gun belt's gone. They must have taken it.
They did. I'm sorry, Sheriff. I was afraid they'd kill me unless I did as they said. I didn't think they'd hurt you.
The polecats wouldn't have had the chance to knock me out if my gun hadn't misfired. I reckon they got the gun, too.
No.
Here, gun.
Yeah, well, that's the one.
Me pick it up from floor. It got trigger guard cut way.
Oh, may I see it, Toto?
That was my husband's gun.
It's a good one.
I bought it along with a gun belt and fired a dozen shots trying it out. It worked fine till the showdown with those crooks.
Here's the cartridge that misfired.
I'd sure like to know why those hombres were so anxious to get the gun belt. What are you doing, mister?
The bullet is loose in this cartridge.
Well, sure enough.
There's no powder in this shell. That's why it failed to fire. The shell is filled with paper.
Paper?
Yeah, here it is, tightly rolled up.
Now, why in tarnation...
Look at this, Sheriff. Seems to be a map.
The line looks like a trail route, ending at a place marked X. What's that writing say?
Castle Butte, Big Rock, Little Mesa.
Must be landmarks. Here, look at this, Mrs. Mason. Does it look like your husband's handwriting?
Yes.
Aye, savvy. Hook and his pals hid the Wells Fargo cash. That's why they didn't have it when I arrested them. Hook drew this map so they could find the place where they'd left it.
Was this cartridge in the gun belt?
Yes. And I'll bet Hook's pals, Hap Miller and Lance Holt, are the ones who stole the belt.
The newspaper said they were in jail.
They were released a few hours ago on a court order.
I see.
I suppose there's no use arresting them again. I couldn't prove they stole the gun belt.
Even if you could prove that, you'd have nothing to connect them to the Wells Fargo robbery.
You're right.
Oh, Sheriff, will you step outside with me for a minute? There's something I'd like to discuss with you.
Why, sure thing.
I'd better start for home.
Oh, wait, Mrs. Mason. I'll escort you home in a little while.
That'd be kind of you, Sheriff.
What's on your mind, mister?
I have a plan that might trick those crooks into convicting themselves of robbery and murder.
Yeah?
I need your help. I'll have to borrow clothing such as an Easterner would wear.
Well, I'll lend you the clothes, but...
But what?
I want to know who you are.
I wondered when you'd bring that up. Sheriff, people call me the Lone Ranger.
Mm-hmm. I suspected that when you mentioned the name of your Indian friend. I've heard of you both.
Now, if you want proof that I'm on the side of the law...
No, I'm satisfied. What's your plan?
I'll wear a disguise and pose as the agent for an Eastern firearms factory. I'll register at the hotel.
The masked man's plan was both daring and dangerous, but finally the sheriff agreed to cooperate. The next morning, Sheriff Trent appeared in the Nugget Cafe. He wore his old six-shooter and complained loudly that the new gun he'd bought from Mrs. Mason was not dependable. Several of the cafe patrons immediately became curious, and the sheriff explained,
I let an Eastern firearms expert take the gun for a checkup. I reckon he'll find out what's wrong with it.
I didn't know there was an Easterner in town.
Well, the gent I mentioned arrived last night. He should be here in the cafe right now. He promised to meet me.
Stranger just came through the front door.
He's the man.
Wearing borrowed clothing and with his face disguised, the Lone Ranger walked directly to the sheriff, who stood with a group of men at the end of the bar.
Good morning, Sheriff.
Howdy, mister. Did you get that cold fixed up?
Well, there was nothing wrong with the gun. It failed to fire because one cartridge was loaded with paper instead of powder.
Paper? Well, of all things.
Here's your gun.
Now, why in tarnation would there be paper in a cartridge?
Probably someone wanted to play a joke on the owner of the gun.
Fine joke. Might cost a man his life.
If you don't mind, Sheriff, I'll keep the paper and the worthless cartridge.
I don't mind. Why do you want it?
As a souvenir, I'm interested in souvenirs and curiosities.
Yeah?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I'm going to investigate some of the curiosities of nature in the Badlands. I've heard of the strange rock formations.
You intend to go out to the Badlands?
Yes, later in the day.
Yeah, that's no place for a tenderfoot.
No,
You
sure.
might get lost.
Oh, I'm sure I'll be able to take care of myself.
Well, it's your funeral.
Later in the morning, Hap Miller and Lance Holt, disappointed at not finding the map in any of the cartridges in the stolen gun belt, returned to Orville from their camp. They soon learned that an eastern tenderfoot had headed into the Badlands with a paper-loaded cartridge taken from the sheriff's gun. The two outlaws immediately set out in pursuit, unaware that they in turn were being followed by the sheriff, his deputy, and Tonto. After riding for some time across the rock-strewn Badlands, Hap and Lance saw a column of smoke rising from beyond a massive boulder.
No one but a greenhorn would build a fire that smokes that much.
It must be the tenderfoot's fire. I reckon he's trying to cook some grub.
You know, you'd almost think he wanted someone to find him.
I doubt that, Hap. I think he's got that map, and now he's trying to find the landmarks. Maybe he thinks he's on the track of buried treasure or something.
Let's get to him. Get up there.
Come on, get up.
A few minutes later, the two outlaws reached the campfire, where the man in eastern clothing was preparing a meal.
Oh, there.
The disguised Lone Ranger arose to greet the horseman.
How do you do? Will you two gentlemen share my food?
We've got other plans. Ice your hands.
A gun.
Two guns. Get your hands up.
This is an outrage.
You better take his gun, Lance.
Yeah, right. This is a fine gun for an expert to be carrying. It's ready for the scrap heap.
Why are you holding me up?
You've got a map. We wanted to.
Who told you I had a map?
Never mind how we know about it. Hand it over.
If you want it, you'll have to take it.
I'll do that.
And fight for it.
Why, you...
And here's another.
No, you'll pay for hitting me.
And another.
No.
Stand back, Lance. I'll shoot him.
No, don't shoot. I want to beat him to the ground.
I'll help you.
Rather than arouse the suspicion of the crooks by giving up the map too easily, the Lone Ranger fought the most difficult battle of his life. In accordance with his plan, he had to lose the fight, but without being maimed or killed. From behind a pile of boulders a short distance away, Tonto and the two lawmen who had followed the outlaws watched the struggling men. Jake, the deputy, said,
Sheriff, your friend's getting the worst of it.
I know it, Jake. He planned to.
But he's taking an awful beating.
You're right. We can't let this go on. Let's get down.
No, wait.
But, Tonto, I didn't figure it'd be like this.
He must have not want us spoil things. Him know how to take blows. Look, he's down. Now, them stop punching.
All right, hold your guns ready. If those crooks make a move to kill our friend, let them have it.
Hap and Lance bent over the Lone Ranger, who lay motionless on the ground, and searched through his pockets for the map.
He sure put up a fight.
He's mighty tough for an Easterner. I hope he's got the map.
Hey, there's something in this pocket.
Yeah.
A piece of paper.
Is that the map?
Yes. And the empty shell's in the same pocket.
We don't need that. Let's see the map.
Yeah. It looks easy to follow.
Sure it is. As long as we know, we have to start from Slim Butte. Let's get going.
What about the Easterner?
Leave him where he is.
He's still alive. Maybe we ought to shoot him so he can't identify us.
Even if he's able to reach town after the beating we gave him, we'll be a long way from here by the time he tells his story.
All right, Hap. Let's get going.
Yep, steady.
Come on, up there. Easy there.
It was sunset when Hap Miller and Lance Holt reached an odd-shaped boulder, at the base of which, according to the chart, the Wells Fargo money had been buried. It took but a few minutes to recover the sacks of currency and transfer the money to saddlebags. Then Hap said,
If Hook was here, we'd have to split the cash 3 ways instead of 2.
Yeah. A half is bigger than a third.
Hey, Lance, why are you holding your gun on me?
And all of it is bigger than a half.
You don't mean... Hey, Lance, you're not going to shoot me.
Guess again, Hap.
No, please.
Drop that gun.
Huh?
Hey, he's masked.
Drop that gun.
I'll drop you. Oh, my hand.
You shouldn't have tried to shoot me.
You're covered, Hap.
The sheriff.
Ice your hands.
Yeah, they're up.
Yeah, all right, Tonto, take their guns. Disarm the critters, and Jake will snap the handcuffs out of them.
Hey, where'd you come from? Who's the masked man?
Yes, we figured you'd find the money if you got the map, so we just followed you.
But that masked man.
You should remember me, Lance. We had a fist fight a little while ago.
No, you can't be the Easterner.
I don't believe it.
Hold your hands out for these bracelets.
I don't sell him.
You're under arrest for the Wells Fargo robbery and the murder of the stagecoach guard and driver. That's all you've got to say.
And this time we've got you with the stolen cash.
That should silence your critic, Sheriff.
It sure will. Especially when the coroner and Mrs. Mason testify about Hook's crooked finger. Should be easy to prove that Hook's the man who was wanted, dead or alive, for breaking out of the Missouri pen.
And if you need more proof, you have Hook's gun with the cutaway trigger guard.
That's right. Thanks to you, mister, that newspaper editor is going to eat his words.
Tonto and I are proud to have worked with a good lawman, Sheriff.
Well, I'm proud to have worked with you.
Hey, come on, Tonto. Adios, Sheriff. I'm certain this day's work will assure your re-election.
Thanks again.
Easy, steady, big fella.
Easy, fella.
Come on, Silver!
Oh, that masked man.
Yeah, look at him ride. He's no Easterner.
That's right, Hap. He's no Easterner. He's the Lone Ranger.
Hail, Silver! Hoy!
This is a feature of the Lone Ranger Incorporated, created by George W. Trendle, produced by Trendle Campbell Muir Incorporated, and directed by Charles D. Livingston. Tonight's drama was written by Fran Stryker. The part of the Lone Ranger is played by Brace Beamer.